We're still talking about divided fractions, but this time we are going to look at unlike denominators because when your denominators are the same, you just have to focus on your numerator. But when we have unlike denominators, we have to do extra steps. So here is an example. You have 2/3 divided by 1/2. Remember when you add and you subtract your fractions and your denominators are different, you have to find your LCD and you have to find equivalent fractions. It's the same strategy we are going to use. Don't get confused because your operation is different or because you have division. Don't get confused about that. All right. Just know your strategy, use your strategies that you know. So now we are going to find equivalent fractions. We have 2/3 and we also have 1/2. Remember, these are just a part of a whole. You need to find your unit. And as mentioned in previous lessons, you do that by finding the multiples of your denominators and see what is the least number that they share. In this case, the least number they share is 6 because 2 times 3 is equal to 6. 3 times 2 is equal to 6. And also, when you do your multiples, you'll see that they meet at 6. Yes, they meet at 12 as well. They meet at 18 and 24. But we don't want to go that high. We need to find the least number. So 2/3 is the same thing as 4/6. And 1/2 is the same thing as 3/6. Remember, the reason why we're doing this is so that we can have the same denominators. If your denominators are the same, then you know that you can just go ahead and work the problem out. You have 4/6 divided by 3/6. Your denominators are the same. Do you remember what we are going to do? Yes, we are going to ignore the denominators. Make sure if they're the same, you just ignore them. You can just cross it out or put an X or whatever you want to put to show that you're ignoring them. Because you ignore your denominators, now you need to focus on your numerator. So you're going to do numerator divided by numerator. And you have 4 divided by 3. And again, we can write that many ways, but because we're talking about fractions, we're going to write it as fraction. And remember, you read it from left to right. So our 4 is going to be our numerator, and our 3 is going to be our denominator. And do you remember what we call this? When your numerator is bigger than your denominator. Yes, we call it an improper fraction. And when we have improper fraction, we can never leave it as our answer. Again, you can never leave an improper fraction as your answer unless they ask you to. But if they don't, you have to change it. And we do that by doing a couple of things. You can either divide, remember, this is your denominator. So denominator goes on the outside, and the 4 or your numerator, it goes on the inside when you're doing long division. And there's a strategy that we can use for this is DMSB. The D stands for division. The M stands for multiplication. The S stands for subtraction. The B is you're bringing it down or you're bringing it back. And we'll learn about what we're bringing down versus what we're bringing back in another lesson. So we're going to divide first. You need to do You need to do this. How many times can 3 go into 4? We know that it goes one time and it also leave a remainder. But let's work step by step. You divide, and we know that 3 times 1, that's where our multiplication comes in. 3 times 1 is equal to 3, and we have 1 in our remainder. But because we are not talking about 4th grade math, what we are going to do is we're going to rewrite all of this. Let me erase some stuff so that it is not too much going on my screen. So I'm going to write W for my whole. Whatever is on top, that's your whole number. Whatever is at the bottom, that's your numerator because that's what's left over. And this 3 right here, remember, it's already in your denominator. So you're going to keep it the same. And now you need to rewrite it. Remember we said 1 is our whole, which is this part right here. That's your whole. This 1 over here, that's our numerator because that's what's left over. And the 3 right here is our denominator. Keep your denominator. Don't even change it. Let's look at another way we can do this. Let me change my color. And another way you could have done this is you can rewrite it. You can see 4/3 when you expand it or you put a magnifying glass. What it actually is this 1/3 written 4 times or added 4 times. So let's write it out. You have 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3. Add all of these, you can see that it's equal to this, our 4/3, because 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. 2 plus 1 is equal to 3. 3 plus 1 is equal to 4. That's 4/3. And then if you take 3 of the 1/3, if you rewrite it, it'll be 3/3. And we already said that 3/3 is the same thing as 1 whole. And since you have the plus 1/3, you can just put it together. Remember, we spoke about this in our adding fractions lesson. 1 plus 1/3 is the same thing as 1 and 1/3. And this is how we will read it. If you have a whole number and you have a fraction, the way you will read it is 1 and 1/3 or whole number and fraction.